I never thought something so small could cause so much terror. It all started with that damn locket. It had been a gift, or rather a family heirloom, something that had been passed down through generations. Ever since I found it in my parents' attic, I had been fascinated by it. It had a large blue gem in the center, surrounded by symbols I couldn't quite identify. At first, I saw it as a nice antique object, something I could carry with me, a kind of amulet. But 3 nights ago, everything changed. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I came home exhausted from college. It was raining just like it is now, and I couldn't wait to get into bed. When I walked into my apartment, though, I found something I wasn't expecting. An unreturned letter on the table. There was no way anyone could have gotten in, but there it was, waiting for me. When I opened it, there was only one warning. Do not activate the locket after midnight, ever. I stared at that sentence, wondering if it was a sick joke or some kind of trick to scare me. Activate the medallion? There was no mechanism, no button, nothing that seemed to suggest it could be activated in any way. I put it aside, forgot about it, or at least that's what I thought. That night, insomnia took hold of me. It was 11:58 when I decided to get up and take a look at the locket once more. I held it in my hands, admiring the gem sparkle under the dim light of my room. As I absent-mindedly caressed it, I felt a gentle tremor. The clock struck midnight. It wasn't a simple change of time. Something in the room changed with me. First, there was silence. Not the kind of silence we are used to, like when the music turns off or the traffic stops. This silence was different, as if the whole world had shut down. I couldn't hear my own footsteps or my breathing. I walked out into the hallway of my building, hoping to find someone, maybe my neighbor, or any sound that would bring me back to normal. But what I found was a city that seemed to have been wiped off the map. New York was empty, deserted. There were no cars, no people, not even the familiar sounds of the city. It was like I was trapped in a parallel dimension. I screamed. I screamed so loud my throat hurt, but there was no echo, no response, just that damned silence that enveloped me like a suffocating blanket. My heart began to beat so fast I thought it would explode. I ran, though I didn't know where. My feet echoed on the wet pavement, but the sound died as soon as I hit the ground. The city itself seemed to have disappeared. I soon realized that I wasn't completely alone. As I walked through the deserted streets, I saw a figure in the distance. At first, I felt relieved. Someone else is here, I thought. But the closer I got, the stranger everything became. The figure was tall, too tall, and its face, it wasn't a face. It was like a shadow in human form, a dark entity that moved with an unnatural calm. I froze. I couldn't move or even breathe. I could only watch as the figure slowly approached. As it moved forward, I could feel a cold presence filling the air, as if it brought with it the absence of life. I tried to run, but my legs were unresponsive, stiff, trapped in the deepest fear I had ever felt. The figure stopped right in front of me, but it didn't say anything. There was nothing human about its presence. It had no eyes, but I felt its gaze on me, as if it could see past my skin, past my bones, into my soul. In that moment, I understood. This thing, whatever it was, didn't belong in this world. It was something the medallion had brought with it. I backed away slowly, shaking, trying not to lose my sanity. Suddenly, I felt a vibration in my chest. The medallion. The blue gem began to glow again, as it had before. The figure stood still, but it seemed to react to the glow, as if it were waiting for something. Desperate, I tried to take off the medallion, but I couldn't. The chain had tightened around my neck, as if it were welded to my skin. Then what I feared most happened. The figure leaned toward me, and though it had no face, I felt its breath, cold as ice, brushing against my skin. It was then that it spoke, not with words, but in a whisper that resonated directly in my mind.
You shouldn't have crossed the threshold. Time belongs to you, and now, so do I.
Fear gripped me completely. I knew I couldn't run. There was no place to hide. This wasn't New York. At least, not the New York I knew. This was a prison, a distorted version of the city, created by the medallion, or something that inhabited it. With every step I took backward, I felt like the world around me was crumbling. Buildings began to shift, their shapes distorting, and soon I saw that it wasn't modern skyscrapers that surrounded me, but ancient structures, ruins of what looked like a Roman city. The streets of New York were transforming before my eyes, as if time itself were fragmenting. It was as if two eras were collapsing into one.
You can't escape.
The voice whispered again, this time closer, deeper inside me. I ran, even though there was nowhere to go. I felt the figure chasing me, its presence always at my back. No matter how much I ran or how fast I moved, it was always there. My feet took me back to where it all began, my apartment. When I opened the door, it was no longer my home. The walls were covered with Latin inscriptions, symbols I didn't understand, but which seemed to be alive, moving in the shadows. The medallion vibrated more strongly, and at that moment I knew there was no escape.
This is not your time, Valeria.
I closed my eyes, feeling the coldness invading my entire body, as if I was being absorbed by the darkness. My mind was on the verge of breaking, and before losing consciousness, I heard one last whisper.
Time never stops, and you don't belong here anymore.
I opened my eyes, and suddenly, everything was quiet again. I was back in my room. Everything seemed normal, but it wasn't. The medallion still glowed faintly on my neck, and even though the city had come back to life, something inside me had changed. I wasn't the same anymore. I don't know how much longer I can take it, because even though the world keeps moving around me, I can feel it. There's always someone watching me, or something.